Morning. Happy Sunday to you all. I always do this thing where I lean in a little bit. It's very strange. Hi. Welcome to the weekly Surviving His Sex Addiction and Betrayal show. I'm Jenny Rochelle. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a life coach and a spiritual director and an advocate for women who have discovered that their husband is a sex addict, or women who have discovered that they have been betrayed and are experiencing betrayal trauma. So today, what I want to talk about is your relationship with God. And I always feel like I need to put in some sort of caveat that if I say God to you and you're like, I don't jive with that. Okay, it's okay. I know that to say the word God can sometimes be off-putting to people. So my story, and I've talked about this, I was raised Southern Baptist, was very strict upbringing, and walked away from that at some point because it just didn't fit with my values. And so I was disaffiliated. That's a great word that I've learned in seminary. It was disaffiliated from my religious upbringing. It was only later in life, actually, when I got sober. So I'm not sure that I've shared that. I'm a recovering alcoholic. When I got sober and I went through and did some 12-step work, that I rekindled my relationship with God. And that was the first time, and I was I think 30 at that point, when I realized that, God and religion and church are really different things, and that I could actually decide what kind of relationship I wanted to have with God that didn't necessarily fit into this bucket of how I was raised. So I have over time developed my own sort of eccentric, quirky, informed by different spiritual teachers I've worked with, relationship with God. I use the word God because it's kind of easier. And most people, know what you're talking about when you say God. But if it's spirit, if it's higher power, if it's universe, if it's Jesus, if it's great mother, all of that is totally good. Because to me, all of that is God. Okay, now that we've sort of covered that, let's set that aside. So what I wanted to start with today was why I do these things on Sunday morning, why I picked Sunday morning. It's because I wanted for a long time to sort of create a church for the disaffiliated. So remember that word? Disaffiliated means that you have removed yourself, or you no longer belong to the religious upbringing that you belong to, you grew up with. And so you're disaffiliated, and sometimes it feels like you don't have a place to go. For many years, I had this great community at a yoga center here in town. We would go to yoga on Sunday mornings, and it was like yoga church, and it was really beautiful. But I wanted to create something online, a presence where women could show up who weren't necessarily going to church, or couldn't get to church because they had kids or a husband or whatever. It just didn't work. But this place, sort of like an online temple, a sanctuary, where you could come and be present and hear sort of a little spiritual teaching or whatever. So that's why I do this on Sunday mornings. When I finally decided to kick this off this last September and do it on Sunday mornings, that's why I get here every Sunday morning and I crank this out. And I know you guys are watching it whenever you're watching it, and that's totally great. That's just some backstory to all of that. Okay, now what I really want to talk about is your relationship with God. So I'm curious if right now, if you're suffering from betrayal trauma, I've discovered that your husband is a sex addict. If you are angry or confused or whatever, pissed, resentful, hurt by God, if you are feeling those feelings right now, then please, if you're watching this live on repeat, just give me a broken heart emoji, if you know how to do that. And if you don't, just say broken heart in the comment section, so that I know that you're with me. I know that you're feeling it. And it's a very common experience. And so I want you to know, first of all, I want to normalize your experience. You're a normal girl. Of course you feel that way, because you probably spent your whole life trying to do all the right things. You were probably a good girl. Most of the time, I wasn't 100% a good girl, but I really wanted to get good grades. I wanted to be pleasing. I wanted to do what I was told. I wanted people to love me. And And so you probably followed all the rules. You've been following all the rules all your life, right? And then you spent the first half of your life creating this beautiful thing that you wanted, all these things that you were supposed to have. So, right, you went to college, you graduated, you got a job, you got married, you got a house, you built a family, this beautiful family. And it's like this moment when you have everything you always wanted. And then all of a sudden, this pipe bomb comes in and blows everything the fuck up, right? I think there's this great, like Jason Isbell song, 24 Frames, right? Where he's talking about God is less an architect and more like a pipe bomb. Like, oh, I think that's just love that language, because that's what it feels like. And it feels like God came in and like chunked this pipe bomb or this Molotov cocktail into your life and it blew everything up. So of course you're confused. Anytime bad things happen to good people, and you're a good person, you may not be perfect, but you're a good person, you didn't deserve this. Anytime bad things happen to good people, we get confused. It doesn't fit together. We can't put those two things together back in our brain, and it's painful, it's heartbreak, it's suffering, and it's like resisting the fact that it happened to us. Like a lot of our suffering comes from the fact of thinking this shouldn't be happening to you. And you know what? You're right. It shouldn't be happening to you, and yet it is. So it's like trying to wrap your brain around how a loving, compassionate God could do this to you. And you know, I don't know that I can really tell you that, except that I don't think that we really understand God as these tiny humans and like what his intentions for our life are. I do know that now that your life is blown up, right, and you're in the desert, right? You're in the desert, you're a woman in the desert. That's like where that metaphor comes from for me, because your life is completely blown up. You know, nothing is left, and you're in the desert, and what you have with you are the bare essentials for what you need to survive. And it's you, and it's your relationship with God, and and all of those things are being tested right now. But you have everything that you need, and you need a lot of support and sisterhood and a choir of angels, because you're not really alone in the desert, even when it feels like that. And here's the thing, like who you become now and the rebuilding of your life at this point, like I think that's just how it works. Like you have this first half of life, and then something terrible happens, and then you have the second half of life where you figure out who you really are and what you're made of. Like I'm getting chills when I say that. I'm not making that up. Like that's some old school, not even old school, but like, you know, Richard Rohr or Thomas Keating, Thomas Merton, some of these great spiritual teachers have talked about this first half of life and the second half of life. And like after the pipe bomb, you enter like the second half of life, and it becomes this really fruitful, beautiful place. And like I don't want to disempower or be cliched or sound self-righteous. I was listening to this great podcast yesterday that was talking about when we tell people that we find meaning in the suffering, like I've found meaning in my suffering, but I think it's a choice to do that. I chose to say to myself, this is horrible. I'm going to survive it, and I'm going to do something with it on the other side of it. That's why I do. That's why I'm here every Sunday morning talking about sex addiction and betrayal trauma, because it has helped me survive. And it could be completely different for you. And the pipe bomb is not always sex addiction or betrayal. It's cancer. It's like, oh, okay, it's that level. Like you lose a child, or you lose the loved one, or like some heartbreaking thing happens to you. Okay, back for a second. The podcast. I was talking about the podcast, and this woman said that sometimes it can sound self-righteous to say that you know the suffering, there's meaning in the suffering. And what her theory was that what suffering does, like the beauty in suffering, is it opens you up deeply to other people, and you allow them in such a way that you would never do without that. I totally get that too. Like when I talk about my dream girls or my sisterhood, like those relationships are so deep. I get chills again. They're so deep and so powerful. And like there's just something about being brought to your knees where you have to be completely vulnerable with another human being and ask for help that changes you and cracks you open in this painful but really beautiful way, because that's how we receive love, right? That's love, is being seen at our most vulnerable and being loved anyway. So, okay, all of that to say, your relationship with God has been tested. I'm guessing that that's true for you. It was true for me. It was true for a lot of women, a lot of partners and women I know who've experienced betrayal. And I'm just saying that you're normal for feeling that way. I'm not saying you got to fix it or how to fix it. I'm saying being open to talking about it and being open to be angry at God. He can take it. He can take it 100%. If anybody or anything can take it, it's God. Be angry. Allow yourself to feel that way. I think we want to talk ourselves out of being angry. Anger's not bad. It's just a sign that probably you've got a boundary violated. Has God violated a boundary? Oh my God, I'm cracking myself up this morning. Like, of course you're angry. You're a normal girl. Allow yourself to feel those. Allow yourself to express that frustration. Like, it's okay. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean, you're not a Christian or you're not a good girl. You're a good person. You're a good person. If you're watching these shows and trying to find answers and make your way through the desert, you're a good person. Okay, I think those are all the things that I wanted to talk about today. If you want to read more about the importance of spirituality, which is it's very important as you move through this time in the desert, that you have some sort of container that you feel like you're held in that sort of helps deliver you through. And if God, like for me, many times, God, the fingers of God, I like to say that phrase, the way he showed up for me was through my sisterhood, was through my yoga teachers, like the therapists and coaches that I worked with. It was through the women in my support group. That was how I saw that God was loving and taking care of me, even when I felt completely abandoned. So right now, I just ask that you try to look around in your life and see if you can find a way or see evidence that God is taking care of you, even though you feel like you've been abandoned and chucked out into the desert alone. Okay, that's all that I ask. And if you want to know more, please go to www.sexaddictionguidebook.com. You can download my free guidebook where I talk about the importance of safety, self-regulation, support, sisterhood, spirituality, and a strategy where you roll all of those things up together to figure out a way to control yourself, not control yourself, to control your life. Control your life. Control, we don't really have control, but there are certain ways you can take some agency back and feel like you're reclaiming your life a little bit. There are certainly ways that you can do that, even though you don't have control over him. You have control over yourself and how you react to this situation. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Sexaddictionguidebook.com. Download it. And if you enjoyed this, please say, loved it, Jenny. I'm pissed at God. or here's even better. If you see a way that God is supporting you right now, please share that in the comments. Maybe it's your dogs, maybe it's your grocer, maybe it's your dry cleaners, maybe it's somebody who's kind to you in some small way, maybe it's your yoga community, whatever it is, just share it in the comments. All right, thank you so much for watching. Until next Sunday.